team won its first game.
Congratulations.
We were 1-up. The other team scored 4 goals in about 2 minutes. They scored another later on, and then we scored like 6 unanswered.
So, is this a league where you guys like pull goalkeepers at halftime?
No, it's just a really bad league.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to another edition of Third Degree, the podcast, episode number 20? Is this number 20? Holy cow, we should have a celebration if it is. Hi, I'm Peter, and I'm tired and kind of grumpy because we're doing this for the first time on the heels directly after an FC Dallas game, one that featured... well, goodness, not a good result. Joining me tonight is the normal duo of guys, Dan Crook. Come in, Dan. How are you, sir?
Good evening, Peter. I'm good, thanks. I'm just emerged from the bomb shelter where I kept Dan Hunt company during the game.
That was very nice of you. And also, our leader and co-editor of Third Degree .net, Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Good evening, fellas. Tonight I'm calling in from my bedroom where I'm all warm and snuggy in my PJs.
That's the best.
Buzz in a onesie.
Buzz has,
with the footies.
What now? But does it have the flap, the emergency got to go to the bathroom flap over the butt?
I'm beyond the flap, but I've definitely got the footies.
Oh, that's too bad. I was hoping for the flap. All right, well, we are now looking and staring right at 3 straight losses. FC Dallas 0, LAFC 2. 4 out of their last 7. Guys, I got to wonder, with this string of form that we've seen of late, even with the 2 victories mixed in that last 7, what are we seeing more of? A byproduct of a rookie coaching staff or poor roster construction?
I think it's a little bit more on roster construction. I think the coaches and the players on this team have talked a lot about we have good squad depth. They keep saying that. I'm not sure I buy that. I think that they have some young kids that are big parts of their team, but I don't think they have a lot of proven depth. And I think that's being showcased pretty clearly when you've got a few injuries and you got a couple guys missing that have become key cogs. That's a big strain on your roster. You still got 2 open roster spots. You still got some guys that are not really contributing to the team. So I think I'm going to go with the poor roster construction part of the equation.
Yeah, that seems fair. I mean, for all of the coaching faults in this rookie phase, you can say they're faults that many coaches take years to get rid of. In terms of times of substitutions and, when to actually be proactive or reactive. They say it's largely roster construction. Can talk all day about the depth. The midfield was such a key point to have depth in. Well, a lot of that depth's now in Poland at the Under-20 World Cup. So, how deep is it really?
I tend to think there's elements of both of those. Now, look, going to LAFC in LA and losing 2-0 is really no alarming deal because there's going to be a ton of teams that go in there and have that exact same thing, if not worse, happen to them. But this comes on the heels of what I do think has to go down as one of the most embarrassing losses in this club's history, which was last weekend when New York Red Bulls marched into town and did the most disrespectful thing they could possibly do. They started essentially their B team and trounced the Huntsmen 3-1 in Frisco. And the one thing that I want to point out to everybody that is bothering me more than anything else is that these 2 losses did not come with a starting 11 filled with academy kids. It was actually the most veteran lineups that Lucci has put out on the field all season long, made up mostly of imported veteran players, and they've played the shittiest ball with those lineups.
No, I would agree with that assessment. The New York game had its moments, but when you're playing a team where they do a complete squad rotation and roll out nobody, you should trounce that team. That was what we joke about the hashtag disrespectful, but that's what that whole discussion came from a commentator saying you should crush this team when you come in here with this kind of thing. And that's exactly the way you should feel. This is a team that essentially Dallas played in the spring in one of their final tune-up games and handled easily. You are correct, and it raises an interesting point that I've been trying to wrap my head around this week, is that some of these veteran players that FC Dallas has and has been using of late are not actually now the key components and the best players of this team. Pamacol's 20 years old. Cerrillo has become a humongous cog. Jesus Ferreira in the New York game was on the bench. He's 19 years old and is leading scorer on the team and has now 3 out of 3 goals in 5 games, I think it is, or something. It's the kids have become this team, and when it's amazing to me that when you're missing them, you went to what arguably was a veteran team coming in from last year, and it's not performing. It really is. That's what's really amazing to me, is that the kids are now the team.
I think as well, you said about the veteran presence. Those veterans are all still trying to find their place in this team. Ryan Hollins has had that run at left back, gets moved to the wing, and suddenly struggles. Again tonight, he might as well have not been on the field. Same with Badji. He's not getting any regular time at any one position, or on the field at all. So there's is he a winger? Is he a left winger? Is he a right winger? Is he a striker? What's going on? Are we going to play him back a little bit behind a striker? There's the young kids all seem to either know their place or know their places, and have a mindset of right on the field, get down, play. That's it. Some of the older guys just seem to struggle to adapt.
But I think if you go down the roster in the last 2 games and really put some thought to it, what is most disturbing is that all of these players that are veteran, albeit some of them are still young, but they were playing in theory, high-level ball in other countries and were, quote-unquote exciting signings, have failed to deliver across the board. You've got Mascara, who is a literal on and off switch. And by the way, I've got a whole hot sports opinion about how soft that guy is. And you've got Aranguiz, who has still yet to score a goal or provide an assist. He's been given plenty of opportunities. You've got players also in addition to that, like
Cobra.
Well, yeah, I was going to get Badji. Badji's my next one. So Badji is a player they brought in on a trade. Now maybe you can make the argument, look, we had to get Kellen out and we had to get something in return and this was the best we could get. Don't blame us. All right, maybe I'll even give him a pass on that. But then you've got Cobra, and that guy is the most useless lump I have seen. I mean, I don't know how somebody went to Eastern Europe and scouted this guy and thought, oh yeah, he's MLS quality. And I don't even understand how the team even made a big deal about him coming here. The ball coming off his knees was the most Christian Coman thing I have seen since Christian Coman. So when you think about all of these players that are in here, and again, Brian Acosta, somebody asked the question on Twitter today how Brian Acosta can be this team's record signing, and my response in my head is, you know what, that's $2 to $3 million is probably a fair and accurate value for Brian Acosta. The problem is that's the amount of money that is considered a record signing for this club, and that's why everybody else that is a foreign import is really kind of at best, a mediocre MLS player, at best, and that's what you have supporting a team largely made up of young kids.
Well, I felt like Acosta's been pretty good acquisition. The last couple of games, he's in there basically doing a lot of it almost by himself.
Buzz,
so that's,
don't misunderstand. I'm not trying to knock on Acosta. I think Acosta is a solid player who would probably excel at inside a much better team than this. But he's being asked to do way more than I think he's capable of.
They're asking him to do more right now, for sure. They're asking him to be more than you're right he's capable of. Now, if you're talking about him with Grezzo and Paxton, I think it's great. But you are correct that we laughed about the idea that he's their record signing, and he's just you look at the value of what they paid for him, and you laugh like that's your record signing. The MLS is in a new era where the teams at the top of the thing are spending $15 million on players, not $3 million on players. But we've known that it is going to be what it's going to be. How many times this year we heard Litchi say we're a developmental club, and then there was even that quote at the end of last week, I think it was, where Dan Hunt said that there's a whole bunch of kids in the academy that they consider this golden generation. Well, I think that started. Yeah, I know. But I think what that tells you is their mentality, right? That's where their focus is. Their focus is, and that's why they hired Lucci, right? Because rather than somebody else, because he came from the academy and he bought into this build system. So you're looking at a team that is at the beginning of a youth movement that's going to take 2 or 3 years to get implemented into place and 2 or 3 years to develop, right? They're not looking at this season. They're looking at the next decade, essentially. So if you're lucky, if you're super lucky, this is like when Beckham and his boys came out of the Manchester United Academy as a group, and the 4 or 5 of them, I think there was 5 of them, played together in a team that won title after title after title. If you're unlucky, you're going to have a bunch of 18-year-olds playing on this team over the next decade, and you're not going to be winning all the games anymore. But that, those factors are all pointing us to what we all talked about at the beginning of the season, that we believe from the get-go, is that this is a transitional year. They're going to start bringing in kid after kid after kid. The investment in the new North Texas team is an example of that. And it's going to be a struggle this year to try and get these kids to progress when you're surrounding them with guys that maybe aren't up to the level of new MLS. You look at that team that LAFC fielded today, they don't use any academy kids. Now, I'm not knocking out Dallas's academy kids because a lot of them are fantastic, but you cannot look at the two teams and say that those are equivalent balanced rosters. They're just not. It's a new era in MLS, and I don't know that the Hunts are ready to keep up.
Dan, it was pretty stunning to take a moment and soak in the scenes from LAFC Stadium, in the stands, on the field, and not come away with just the clear vision that these are two clubs that could not be more polar opposite on and off the field.
Yeah, the engagement in the area, the quality of that stadium, the everything, really everything. The way the front office there have worked with the supporters to make that look like such an appealing place to be, and then they've complemented with the players. Okay, you honestly you can look at LAFC and they're not a roster of superstars. You've got Carlos Vela, a fantastic player, and then you got guys like Jordan Harvey and Latif Blessing, who, let's be honest, they could go on Colorado's roster and not make a damn difference. But
you're still talking about. We've talked. I don't mean to interrupt, Dan, but I'm going to. We talk about all the time difference makers, right? The guys that are special. And right now, Dallas only has one, and he's hurt, and LA has 3 or 4. So this is a significant difference.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, I think, even taking it back a step, like difference makers for FC Dallas. FC Dallas is, one of the largest problems with FC Dallas is the scouting network. You look at the Euro imports, and Cobra's going to be a great example. He had 6 months where he was just on fire. 6 months across his entire career as a 30-year-old. And the club bought in on it completely. You got to think there's no long-term scouting there. You can look at like New York Red Bulls with Bradley Wright Phillips. Bradley Wright Phillips was a terrible player in League Two, but they watched him. They identified a plan of what they could do to make him work in their system, and 5 years later, and he's just now breaking down as a 35-year-old. They've definitely got their money's worth out of him, and really didn't have to pay him very much until like the 3rd season. FC Dallas could easily find somebody like that. They just have to, put that investment into the scouting as well as to complement the academy.
I was thinking about this during the game, and one of the realizations I have is what we're seeing right now is clearly the byproduct of two things. And I want to say this as respectfully as I can. This is a byproduct of several years of the Office of Technical Director and Scouting being headed up by a guy who was battling cancer and ultimately succumbed to that. But you never got the sense the club had a real support structure underneath him to help buffer that role while he was bravely battling that fight. And also the byproduct of your spiritual leader / head coach / face of the club making a decision that he didn't want to be there anymore. And the result of that is you replaced him with a very, very rookie coach. And that's what, getting back to what I said earlier, that's why I feel like what we're seeing today is a byproduct of both roster construction and, just rookie coaching, which are all things that are, look, if we know all of this going in and our expectations are set properly, we don't have to be too upset about this. But this is not an unpredictable result that we're seeing over the last month, is it?
I was going to say that, I think you're right about the transition. When Muzi was leaving at the same time, he was trying to do some stuff, and they're trying to hire coaches, and they're trying to hire new technical directors, all while they're trying to staff a team. And you ended up with a real hit and miss situation. If you go back a whole year, I think Nedyalkov, was a pretty good hit until he, of course, decided he was homesick. And Mosquera seemed on the surface so far to be a pretty good hit if he can stay healthy. I know you think he's fairly soft. Arangis hasn't panned out, but I think Bresson looks like he could be a nice piece if and when the time is actually around for him to play a fair amount. It's just been about the last couple of years. It seems like it's been about a 50% hit rate, and if you're looking at MLS at the salary cap situation, you can't afford to have a 50% miss rate if you're paying people $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year. Now, we don't know what some of these new guys are getting paid yet, but that'll be the thing that'll really contribute to the hit and miss value of some of these guys is the contracts. So that's a worry. And I agree with you that what we're seeing now as the stresses of the season impact the team, injuries, call-ups. Teams are starting to figure out Dallas a little bit. Those stresses are hitting hard, and and as you say, you have a young staff, and you have some players that have missed, and you have a roster that's not constructed really well right now, and that all piles up and it all contributes.
So I want to make a mention of two things we talked about earlier. One, so after what we thought was an absolutely devastating injury at the end of the Red Bull game, when Mosquera clearly does something to his knee, goes to the ground, pulls himself off the field, the team has no more subs, and whatever has happened to him, he is deemed so bad that he has to be stretchered off the field, and then later is photographed in a hospital with his mom next to him with this giant knee brace on. And I think we all left that thinking, well, he's done for the season, isn't he? And then we find out he's only out 3 or 4 weeks. And when I take that and measure it against some of these other things that I've seen with him, I am really left to wonder how mentally strong that kid is, and if he really has what it takes to be a pro player at this level, willing to play through hurt, not necessarily injury, but play through pain. And I just don't think he's got that in him.
Yeah, he definitely, from my perspective, watching training and stuff, he definitely is a hot and cold mentality. He needs a little loving, a little patting on the shoulder, hey, you're doing good, kid, that kind of build up kind of coaching. I don't know enough about his injury situation to specifically comment on this particular injury. I do know that I do kind of feel like he is a guy that doesn't want to play through pain. That there's a difference between injured and hurt.
Compare him to Reggie
Yeah.
Cannon. We've watched Reggie literally force himself to stay on the field when he looks like one of his body parts are falling off. He's like the knight from the Monty Python movie.
Yeah, when you're talking about players that can play through that kind of stuff. Reggie is a guy that absolutely can. Some guys just can't, and it seems like Mascara is that kind of guy. I still have hope that he's actually going to be a really talented player and a really good piece for Dallas. I just don't think you can count on him to ever be a 30-game piece. He's going to be more like a Diaz. He's going to be more like a 20-game piece. And sometimes that's okay. The problem, as we've talked about before, that's okay if you don't miss on other stuff. If you don't miss on draft picks, and you don't miss on signings, a guy that only plays 20 games is fine. It's when you miss and it magnifies those guys, and you're having to use guys like you're trying to make Ryan Hollingshead play as a wing when he hadn't played in a wing in 4 years. It's a tough to mask those misses when you don't have the depth. It all piles up and it all contributes together.
And then, Buzz, I think you've got a dirty little secret to reveal related to Grezzo.
Well, I don't know how dirty it is necessarily. They keep listing him as a lower body strain, and I was there when it happened. And it's funny that I'm laughing about it because I was watching him when it happened, and it's not a lower body strain; it's a damn hamstring.
Well, that's
like,
the lower body.
Yeah, I mean it's lower body, but it's like what? Why bother with that? Just say what it is. And now in this case,
but you know why? But Buzz,
I know why,
right?
I know.
They don't want
I
to
know.
admit they've had another hamstring injury for Christ's sake.
Right, I know, but just admit it. I'm watching him run, so it's not like he fell down screaming like it's a rip. It's just all of a sudden he stopped running and kind of gestured toward his hamstring and walked off the field and walked into training. And I've had reports from the staff that it's not a particularly bad one. It's kind of like when Hollingshead had one where this kind of popped up in training. So I'm not particularly concerned about it, except that Copa America is around the corner. And it's, as usual, as I say with these kind of hamstrings, it's better to, even if it's really mild, it's better to shut it down for a week or two than trying to play on it and tearing it, because then you're out a long time. Tear it. So it's not surprising to me that once Grezzo had this tiny little hamstring issue that he was going to miss a game or two. I knew that was what was going to happen. I had a whole conversation with Lucci about it, about what happens and how bad is it and all this kind of thing. So I knew it was coming, and I knew he was going to sit out. And if the MLS Cup was tomorrow, he'd probably play. But on the other side of the coin, he's got to protect himself too, because there's all these rumors about him being sold again. I think, didn't Twellman talk about multiple offers? I think he was talking about Grezzo on the show tonight.
Yeah,
so the team is the team. What I can tell you is that the team knows that they are now a selling team, and this is a selling league. Guys are going to be gone, and they're shutting him down to protect him, and for whether he's here or not, you can't. It's understandable. I just laugh at the idea that you're not just going to call it a hamstring, that you're going to call it a lower body. That's what makes me laugh.
Dan, I'm wondering and trying to get back to some of the more specifics about both the Red Bull game and the game tonight, the 2-0 loss in LA. Tactically, I just get the sense that Lucci, I can't tell if Lucci is just ham-fist convicted on the idea that he's going to try to figure out a way to get a ball in the opposing half of the field, but the manner in which he goes about it tactically in these teams that are pressing them high and pressing them so hard is that he's created a team that I don't even know if they know how to counterattack once they win the ball back in their own half. That's the most glaring problem with this team at this point to me.
Yeah, the few times there were counters. There was a really nice one that started with Nelson. Kind of got wasted when Aranguiz failed to spot an overlap developing. On the right hand side, you had I remember one break for Reggie. Ryan's playing on the right wing at that time, and they couldn't figure out where to run. There was no overlap, underlap, and it was. They both just run into just a horde of LA players. It's frustrating to watch. It's frustrating. I'm definitely a big proponent of football played the right way with the ball on the ground, but there's sometimes when you're under that press, you have to ping a ball over the top or just leather one out to the wings, and I don't know, we're just seeing the same patterns. FC Dallas are trying to sort of play it around until some space develops, which is great in some games because that does happen. You can pull a midfielder inside and create that gap. Last week, tonight, that wasn't happening, and it was just a frustrating back and forth until eventually, there was a press from LA, and suddenly FC Dallas are playing themselves into danger in their third of the field.
Yeah, the opening goal, I thought, first off, when I saw the lineup and realized that poor John Nelson was going to have to face off against Carlos Vela, I just thought that was fundamentally unfair. But credit to him, I thought he handled Vela fairly well. He did commit several turnovers in their own third of the field, although, to be fair to him, one of those was something that I noticed several times with Brian Acosta. And by the way, I thought Brian worked very hard, but there were several balls where teammates were trying to play the ball to Brian, and Brian was not making an effort to come check to balls. He was almost like he was waiting for the ball to arrive to him, and that just created, I think I saw that 3 or 4 times in the course of just the first half alone. But let me get back to Nelson. On the opening goal, that actually wasn't Nelson's fault, and that was a byproduct of some poor center back play between Rito and Matt, who are arguably the 2 most veteran players on the team.
Yeah, Hedges took that step back to play Vela on the side while Ziegler stepped up away from him.
Yeah, Ziegler left him and Hedges held him on. I mean, it doesn't get any bit different than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something you learn as a kid to hold the line, step up as a line, look across the line in defending. It was just, that's just a lapse in concentration. It's not the first time it's happened.
So, Buzz, one of the other things I noticed in 2 parts. One, there was a sequence at about the 38th minute where Dallas finally got their foot on the ball. They started to make some build-up play going forward. They got about 15 yards into LA's half of the field and ran into a roadblock. And before you knew it, the ball was all the way back to Jesse at the other end of the field, and they had to start over again, which subsequently 10 seconds later they turned over. What is it about this collection of players where they don't seem to have people who want to take on and beat defenders, and they seem way more comfortable just pulling the ball backwards and playing it laterally or backwards?
That's a good question. It must be part of Lucci's teaching to keep it and rotate it back and rotate it around rather than being aggressive, because the only player we see do that is Paxton. Mosquera did it a little in the spring, but it was less about one-on-one as much as it was like more of a slashing run and wanting to play like a combo with somebody sort of checking to him. But it's an interesting question. Lucci preaches keeping the ball, and they want a high number of passes. They want to mess it around. But we've talked ad nauseum about how they're tops in the league-ish with possession in their own end, but they're worst in the league in the other end. They don't yet know as a collective for sure how to advance and break down the play in the offensive third. It's too reliant on individual talents, whether it be Barrios' verticality or Paxton's aggressiveness, both defensively and offensively, or Mosquera's cuts, or Hollingshead's underneath support run, or Reggie's get to the end and try and cross it. It's the collective will is not there yet offensively, and so when they run forward, they run into a wall. Their mindset is to keep it and reset. And it's certainly different than what we've seen before. And in and of itself, is it a bad thing? I don't know. I might feel great about it if it was converting into goals, if they were getting forward eventually and getting opportunities. But it's kind of strange that there's a relatively high percentage of the goals this team has scored have come from counterattacks, which is kind of weird.
Well, you know what?
They're a team that sits deep like they do.
You say that, But when I go look up the stats, well, I think it's Who Scored, shows that the only one goal they've scored this year is considered a counterattack.
Yeah, but they don't have all that many goals, so it's.
Well, I'm only saying one, so I don't know how many goals they. I think they're only like on 11 goals, so that's still a pretty low 10%. Percentage. Well, okay,
right? If they got 10, I mean, I had to look it up real quick, but I feel like
I think it depends on how they define counterattack, because I think somebody else, some other site will say it's 3 or 4.
But think about how many goals they've scored that are very vertical by nature. Well, Barrios has got 5 assists, and how does he play? So,
without question, whether you call them counterattack goals or byproducts of sequences that started on the counter,
they're vertical.
The getting Barrios into space has largely been their bread and butter for the curse of the season. Now,
I have a question. Let me ask this real quick. I'm going to jump in with a question. What do you guys think about this? In hindsight now, should Lucci have effectively abandoned this game and done in New York and gone with a full squad rotation in favor of the home game on Sunday? In hindsight, now what do you think he should have done?
In hindsight, yes, because honestly, LAFC weren't that good, and I think a fresh team would have at least some shot of getting 3 points.
Yeah, I mean, hindsight, foresight, whatever, that probably would have made more sense. And it certainly, and now that you say it, Buzz, that totally sounds like something Oscar would have done.
It's what Oscar would have done, and it's what Schellas Hyman did do. If you remember that time when he had those 3 games in 5 days, I think it was.
Yeah, you're right.
It's what I would have done. I would have sacrificed the road game and started, a bunch of dudes that have yet to play at all. Maybe not 100% like New York, but I would have gotten pretty close, and I would have, because you're talking about the best team in the league, and winning in LA is a virtual impossibility. That was a long shot, even when you're on your best form. So I think I would have sacrificed that game and used it as a learning opportunity for somebody, and then put all my eggs in the home game return basket. But
I'll provide a contrarian point of view on that. If you throw out a lineup made up of all the guys that you haven't seen yet this season or seen very little of, including a Thomas Roberts and a Cobra and the 2 guys that played in the USL last year, whose last names I can never remember how to pronounce, and Nelson and Montgomery, and they go to LAFC and get mowed and blown out 5, 6, 7 goals, whatever it is. I do think there's a danger of setting a tone for the remainder of your season that you probably want to avoid if you can. And as beat up and as bad in form as this team has been over the last, not just 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, this team has not been in good form for several weeks in a row now. I don't know while I agree those are things that maybe Oscar may have done or Schellas may have done, I'm not sure that would have been the right thing to do tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could have, if you'd have stuck with your normal formation, you could have put Bresson in for Ziegler, right? You could have left Nelson in. He played anyway, right? Cannon's young. Could have left him in. Or maybe you try Brian Reynolds at right back. He's not that much further off, right? I mean, Thomas Roberts in for who would have been in for Jesus, I guess. I mean, Cobra started anyway. I mean, Baji didn't play. So you're only looking at like 3 or 4 more differences. I don't know that it was because Hayes would have stayed in. Acosta would have been out. That would have been the other player that would have been out.
Yeah,
I don't know that it would have been all that worse.
Well,
I mean, honestly.
I'm not sure anything gets better. What I can tell everybody is on the team to look forward to is collecting their mileage points, because they have now flown to LA and back. They play LA again Sunday. Then they have to fly even further away to Vancouver the following Saturday, come back, play Seattle on the 1st. Then they fly back to the West Coast on June the 8th. Then Toronto is here, and then Vancouver. So between now and the end of June, they will have made, because at the end of June, they go to Portland. So between now and the end of June, they will make consecutive 1, 2, 3, 4 cross-country trips to the West Coast between now and the end of June. And as we know, charter flights versus commercial flights are a big point of contention with the Players Association as well.
Well, maybe they're going to burn one of their charters in that sequence. That would be nice for them. They get 2, right? Isn't that how that works?
Do we know the last time the Hunts paid for a charter flight?
Have they never done it? I just assume that they, like everybody else, they would just do 2 and that would be it. I think that's the number you get.
Well, I know they have the option for 2, but I believe the stereotype would be that I don't know if they've ever done it. I mean, I would like to think that they have, but I don't ever remember us going, you know what, they took that sweet charter flight out to Toronto or something.
I know they have for sure because I remember discussing it with somebody once, like, oh, no, that's a charter one. So, I mean, I know they do them. I just don't know. I've never really investigated like how many or when. You know, I know it's usually, like you say, a really long flight or a tight turnaround or, you know, when they want to get out of town like late. Like if they'd have wanted to leave LA tonight instead of waiting until tomorrow, that would have been that only way to do that would have been charter. So,
well, the thing they get, I think it's just they get 4 legs. So like every team who's in playoff contention at least will save a couple, you know, in mind for a midweek in the playoffs or a quick turnaround, like you say. But then, you know, you've got potentially 1 round trip, or you can break it down into 2 legs. You know, dividing it over 17 games, particularly with this, or isn't there a midweek in San Jose that, like usual? I mean, yeah, those are tough decisions to make.
So I guess question for both you guys is what, you know, let's all try to be positive here for a second. Is there, you know, something to glom onto to feel like, okay, guys, it's just a rough patch. It's early in the season. Maybe it's better to get this out in May than it is in September. Is there anything for us to grab onto to feel better about?
Sure. I mean, I thought the second half was better. You know, I definitely liked that there was some intensity shown. I liked that maybe everybody didn't just give up. I mean, those are pretty good signs, I think. You know, there is a summer window coming. There is discussion of the kinds of players that might make a more immediate impact coming from Bayern. Maybe. I mean, the positivity going forward is that once this tight window of international call-ups and injuries gets over with, you're still going to have a nice young core with a bunch of young, talented homegrown academies and a couple of foreign signings that you could like to build on going forward. You still have a really young, kind of exciting team, and you still are, relatively speaking, in the playoff hunt. I mean, I think as I click the button to make sure, you're still
they're fifth.
Fifth.
Yeah.
Right. So you're still in the playoffs. You're one of the top 5 teams in the West. Even with bad play of late. You know, I think there's still some talent on this team. I think they need another window to try and get another piece or 2. They need to make some more changes going forward. I think you're going to see some homegrown signings this summer once the academy season ends, whether they be homegrowns or whether they be North Texas signings. You know, there are some kids like Cerrillo. Now, remember, he's an 18-year-old rookie homegrown. There are kids that will be able to add to this team, whether it be depth or whether it be starter, as we go forward. So, you know, we knew this is a rebuilding year. So I think really the team is exactly where we thought they would be. So I'm not too down on it overall. I just think right now they're hurting, and these last 2 games have been pretty poor.
Like you say, you know, it's early days. It was supposed to be a rebuilding year. Could look at it as the start of an early summer slump. Yeah, one thing, like you mentioned, yeah, still in 5th. Honestly, with 7 teams out of 12 making the playoffs and the bottom end of the league being absolutely dreadful, it's probably harder to miss the playoffs than it is to get in at this point.
Well, technically, by just pure numbers, it is.
Well, you know what I mean. You know, there are some games where you'd be like, did they throw that?
But I guess, over the course in this last stretch of 7, where they had the 2 really sketchy wins, has there really been anything about this team that makes you feel like that they're a legitimate, even, you know, just crossing over the Mendoza line type playoff team?
In the last few games, no. But if you look back to the start of the year when all the pieces are in place and everyone's playing well, I think there is. And they're in the dog days of for them with the injuries and the call-ups. This is the tough part. So I can't argue with the fact that they're right now. If they play the way they're playing right now, the whole rest of the season, they're not going to do squat. But if everybody comes back and your MVP Paxton Pomykal comes back, then I think there's a pretty good chance that you're going to be pretty decent.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here looking at the record. So you can kind of carve up the season so far into two parts. The 1-1 tie at home against New England, the win over LA, the loss in Columbus, the win against Colorado, the win in Salt Lake is the quote-unquote good part of the season. And then it went down from there. The loss in Philadelphia, the win against Portland and Dallas that I think a lot of people felt like they got away with, the win in LA, which somehow for some reason didn't feel like a win, the draw
Atlanta.
In Atlanta, sorry.
Yeah.
The 0-0 draw against San Jose, the loss in Houston, the loss against New York's B team, and tonight. And that's the second half of the season, or the second half of the season to date.
Yeah, where you and I would differ there is that I actually think they played pretty well all the way through the Portland and Atlanta games. I think Atlanta was a strategic decision. I actually think Portland played really well because, like, the first goal they scored was off a Paxton press when Ian Rangi's pressed and they stole the ball.
Yeah,
that was a pretty good win.
But then they just abdicated a possession the rest of the game. I mean, it was just pure luck that Portland either A, didn't score on their own, or they didn't get a penalty call against Hollingshead on the handball.
Sure. I mean, towards the end of the game, the other team's pressing and trying to get back. But I mean, I thought they played pretty well for 75% of that game. And then if you go back to the Philadelphia game, they had to start Thomas Roberts, for goodness sake, because they were missing so many pieces. So, I don't put the breakdown quite where you do, but I will. Obviously, the last four games, San Jose, Houston, New York, and LA have been abysmal. And it all coincides with Paxton getting hurt and other players getting hurt, other players getting called up. It's all happening at the same time. So for me, that's the bright side for me, is that window of badness only coincides with these last few things. So to me, the first 10 of the season, or maybe that's too much, first 8 of the season were pretty good.
So while you were answering that question, I was looking at Twitter real quick, and I see a lot of people asking questions about LA's second goal, which was... That was a really weird sequence. I thought the guy that scored the goal was offside. I thought the pass from Diomande to him, he was offside. Turns out he wasn't. But that isn't the controversy. The controversy is that it appears the referee blew his whistle earlier in the sequence.
Yeah, I think when I watched the play happen, to me, it looked like they stopped play, the referees did, prior to the ball going in. And then I was like, oh, they can't look at that. Why are they looking? There's nothing to look at because there's nothing to reverse to. You can't go, oh, it's a goal now when the play was dead. So I don't have the answer to that question, but I absolutely agree that I was mystified by how in the world you can award a goal there when the ball has already been whistled dead.
Well, regardless, it was a foul on Reggie.
Did you think it was?
Yeah, his Diamande's arm extended. He shoved him.
I thought it was shoulder to shoulder, but I wasn't paying close enough attention. I was waiting to see where the ball was when the ball was passed. So
that may be true also, but there's no question to me in my mind that offsides or not, or foul or not, that the play was whistled dead. And so it's play's dead. The play's dead. The ball can't go in the puck. The puck can't go in the goal. The ball can't go in the goal. The ball can't go through the hoop. Whatever. If the play's dead.
It also goes back to the implementation of VAR is just terrible in MLS. The whole thing was clear and obvious error. Well, if there's a prudering 2 frames to see whether it was just his head that was beyond the line of offside or if his foot extended, that's not a clear and obvious error.
I'm going to charge you a licensing fee for use of that term, by the way.
It's quality use of the prudering.
Oh, that's right. I'm going to send you an invoice for that.
Well, sorry, I was watching his leg go back and to the left.
Well,
good one.
Yeah, I mean, it is ridiculous, and I'm sure we'll get some sort of half-assed answer out of Pro over it. But I agree with you, Dan.
They didn't acknowledge the one in Houston when they spent 5 minutes looking at McNamara's. Was it really that bad a foul that they had to look at it to then go and not look at the goal when Figueroa took a dive?
The other question I wonder, should we not be thinking about asking Lucci and specifically the training and doctor staff as to why in the world Barrios was even allowed to come back on the field and play in the second half? I mean, they had an entire halftime to test him and get a sense of what kind of condition he was after getting a knee to the face, which, by the way, isn't a foul. That was some people thought that was a foul on the goalkeeper's part, and it wasn't.
Not in a million years.
But what was he on the field for all of 2 minutes before he clearly was in no condition to be back on the field, and I'm just wondering how we even got to that point.
Yeah, that reminds me of the game where I can't remember the specifics of the game, but last year when Oscar they were literally walking back out to the field, and the player finally says, "Oh, by the way, I can't go." As they're walking back up, Hedges, right? Hedges. With Oscar, and Oscar's like, "Wait, what? Now you're telling me?" And it makes me wonder if Barrios kind of hit himself and was like, "Yeah, I'm fine," and then until he gets out there and starts running, and all of a sudden he can barely handle it. Players hide stuff; they do. And so that may be what I immediately thought of that with last year with Oscar and Hedges and them being caught off guard by that. I mean, it happens.
I seem to remember the Hedges thing where it was a clash of heads that maybe it didn't even stop play for. Barrios was on the floor flat after getting a knee to the face, and the doctors came out and attended to him, and then it was almost immediately halftime after. It just seemed weird that he had a collision like that, and they had an entire halftime, let him back on, and it took all of literally 120 seconds for him to realize he shouldn't be out there. I think there's some questions behind that.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is, and we could pick on the play over the last two games. The one thing we really haven't touched on is and maybe we should spend a couple of minutes just asking the question. Set today's result aside, let's go back to previous Saturday, because that's the one that really bothers me more than anything. How in the world did that starting 11 play so poorly at home against that starting 11?
Well, I don't know. When I watched the game live, the New York game we're speaking of, I actually felt like the first 10, 15, 20 minutes there was a lack of intensity by Dallas. I mean, I think as a player, when you know the other team as well as anybody, when you look at the roster and you see a bunch of second team players and USL call-ups and all that kind of stuff, that you can't help but step onto the back foot and relax. And I thought from the get-go of that game that Dallas lacked some bite and some intensity, and New York didn't. They fought and clawed and battled and played with intense the whole game. And as a consequence, they scored goals in counterattack situations. And if you go back and look at all the goals in particular, they all have defensive breakdowns from Dallas, which we haven't seen a lot of this year. When they've given up goals, it usually is because of a great individual effort by somebody that's on the other team, not a defensive breakdown. And in almost all those situations, when I looked at the tape, the people that were playing out of position, like Acosta playing as a 6-type holding mid, which he did again tonight, by the way. And again, I thought it was terrible. It's not on him. He's not the one that put him there. But he over compresses down to the level of Hedges and Ziegler, and he leaves basically like 2 or 3 guys up top to be marked by a combination of Aranguiz or Roberts after he came in, or a Barrios and a Freya coming back, or whatever it was. And you can't do that. You have to have that top of the box line maintained as well as the middle of the box line. And multiple breakdowns happen because Aranguiz is trying to cover 1 or 2 guys. It's like asking Mauro Diaz to cover somebody. It's like, that's not the kind of player he is. And so you get defensive breakdowns and you lose the game. So it's a combination of a lot of things. But in that instance, I think it was both a question of assumption they were going to win and then defensive breakdowns from people playing out of position or that shouldn't be asked to defend at all.
Dan, did you feel bad for Cobra when he was the victim of being substituted out early for Hollinshead because of the Barrios injury?
No, he didn't do anything.
He ran around a lot. He tried hard.
They won't get
You try
into
hard.
the final thirds. I mean, you can try hard all you like.
Yeah, his passing is a bit off. There are points in stretches with this team, whether it be Cobra, Baji, or Ferreira, that I do wonder if their lack of production or consistent, total touches of the ball throughout a game has very little to do with them individually and far more to do with what's broken with this team in attack. And I haven't seen enough of this guy. I haven't seen anywhere near as much of this guy as you have, Buzz. I said it earlier. I just don't get it. I don't know how they thought he was good enough to play in this league. And when you lose a foot race to Walker Zimmerman, you're really slow.
Yeah, some of it is the disconnect in midfield, but Jesus has produced goals, so it's not only that with Cobra. I've piled on too much on him. I've already told the story of, the first day in training when I saw him, and I said to him within 5 minutes, I was like, uh-oh. I've tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, but there's nothing there that allows him to separate. There's nothing there that is special. I mean, you love his work rate, and you love his effort. He's a great dude. I have no complaints about him, locker room wise, fitting in with the team wise. Fabulous guy. Character, fun, awesome. But the bottom line is if you don't have the ability to separate and create a shot or play tight enough combinations to create space for a shot or out jump a guy or outwork a guy or out muscle a guy, and none of that is true. None of that happens. So I
think in some ways his performance was typified by... he took the ball down the left wing. He's the last man, no options to pass to, and there's 3 LAFC defenders coming in on him, so he knocks it 15 yards ahead of him and tries to outrun them all.
I think that's the race against Walker he lost that made me giggle.
Oh, you're right, yeah.
And as much as you complain about Baji,
walked backwards faster than him.
As much as you complain about Baji, at least Baji has the speed to be able to run by guys. You know what I mean? At least there's something there that you can say as a tool that's useful to the team. And I just don't see it, and I haven't seen it from the get-go with Cobra. And I don't mean to be a jerk and pile on, but not good enough is not good enough. And, we got him for the foreseeable future, just like Coleman.
All right, because we mentioned this a little bit earlier with the summer window coming up. I guess it's possible maybe the Hunts and the front office and the new Gremio dude pull off some sort of summer signing. But Andre Soto asked the question, what would be the last impactful summer transfer move by Dallas? And I had to put my brain to this, and I've got a name in mind. I'm wondering what you two guys would come up with.
Well, Pedroso last season.
Yeah. I mean, he was fantastic.
He came in, and he was one of the best left backs in the league for Oscar over the last half of the season. So,
All right, that's a fair one. Yeah, I was going to say De Guzman back in 2012 when they traded for him from Toronto. Yeah. That was the only other one other than that I could think of.
Daniel Hernandez came in mid-season and helped shore up that team under Shellis. Yeah, and that's kind of going back a fair ways too.
The rest of them, I feel like, are all named Eric.
Yeah.
So
Jetson
wouldn't count.
So, say that again.
I'd have to look at a breakdown of when guys came in. I mean, I can remember how good guys were. Mark Wilson was pretty decent coming in. Didn't he come in mid-season?
I have no idea who you're talking about.
Mark Wilson, Weeping Willow?
No.
Or number 15?
I don't remember that at all.
That was at the back end of the Colin Clark. He played 2 seasons here. It's not that obscure.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. He's Roberto Mina. Was he a mid-season guy?
Yeah, Mina was I'm pretty sure Mina was.
I think he's a mid-season guy.
Yeah, there was Jetterson. There was Eric. There was that Colombian.
How about Ricardinho?
Ricardinho, right? Yeah. There was the Colombian the really old Colombian holding mid last year. There was another South American. holding mid. And
Well,
isn't
Tenwa Bonsu, if you want to go all the way back to
yeah
that far, he was a midseason guy. He was a good midseason pickup.
Was Peter Lucina midseason?
Oof,
I can't remember.
I can't either.
Well,
I mean, Diaz was a mid-season guy, if you want to count him. Not an immediate impact. But
well, no,
overall.
I mean, well, but I think that's no, Diaz was not an immediate impact, and I think
Mascara. So
not Mascara,
not Mascara.
Pedroso.
Got to get my guys right.
I guess that I don't know if I should feel I don't know if I should feel relieved that the best midseason signing was last year, or the fact that it turned out to be a left back. I don't know. That's weird.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about, and it's probably going to feel like we're dogpiling, I do have to at least take a second to ask you guys your reaction to the Dan Hunt quotes that appeared this week, where he was they were talking about, I can't remember who did the story. Oh, it was Will Parchman's article where he was interviewing Dan Hunt as Dan was doing his thing where he's standing on the sideline kicking every ball during one of the games, and he made a comment that he felt like that he was living the golden generation for FC Dallas, which I thought was interesting, but I was really got crazy eyes when I read that he said that he felt like he had a bunch of homegrowns that were more interested in staying in Frisco and winning MLS Cup than trotting off to European deals.
Wow. I mean, I have not talked to every homegrown by any stretch of imagination or every academy kid. I find that last one to be a little pie in the sky. I mean, I think that there's a bunch of academy kids that would love to win here, but I think if you ask any of them, would you rather go to Europe and play for a big club, that they're going to tell you Europe and a big club. I mean, I think that's disingenuous, but I do think he's right. And we talked about it earlier, how it shows where their mindset is in this team. I actually think he's right about the academy in that sense. I think there's still 2 or 3 dudes in the 19s that are good, but the current 17 team is ridiculously stacked. There's a bunch of guys in that team that are at least MLS capable or not better. The current 14s is a really, really special group too. And I think between those two clubs, there's another 3 or 4 guys that are worth talking about. So I think he's not wrong about there being this incredible generation coming. But the downside of all that is that tells you where, as we talked about earlier, that tells you where their thinking is. They're not thinking about bringing in a Carlos Vela. They're not thinking about signing guys for $15 million. They're not looking at your Bradley Wright Phillipses or your Josie Altidores. They're looking at kids that aren't going to be ready for 5 or 6 seasons. So Lucci's treading water with the guys he has and bringing along the guys that are ready in the next couple of years. But it's going to be a little bit of a slog probably until we get to that stage.
When I can't quite tell if I admire. Well, I think there's 2 parts to this question. One, I never know if Dan actually believes any of this stuff that he says. There's that famous story I think I've told you guys where.
I don't either.
Huh?
I don't either.
Well, no, there's that story I think I've shared with you guys where I know that Dan tried to insist that most MLS teams would be mid-table EPL teams to a very high decision maker at one of the major media outlets in this marketplace. And the guy he was talking to actually knows the game pretty well, and he was blown away that Dan would try to convince him of that. But at the same time, I see Dan say things like this, and then I wonder. I think there's a part of me that believes that he actually thinks he's speaking the truth.
All the local soccer media, we've all had conversations with him at one time or another where he's said something that is so far out there that he absolutely believes with a passion. God knows why, but yeah, he does. He's not someone that doesn't say something unless he really thinks it.
Now, I will go out there and say that the top teams in MLS, their first 11 are capable of competing with the mid-table EPL team.
But don't.
I'm not. I'm talking about the very best teams. So what I'm going to say is that where they get crushed is where Dallas is getting crushed right now. It's over the meat of the season. They can't go 30 or 40 teams deep. Players deep, and that's where they would get just annihilated over the course of an EPL season.
Yes, in some sort of mystical universe where MLS teams could play their best 11 players week in and week out without injury, you could make the argument maybe that one or two of them might survive an EPL season.
Right, I'm not speaking about an actual real season. I'm only talking about like the if you take the best team in MLS and look at their first 11, it can hold up to a mid-tier EPL team. But you can't talk about it in a real season or a real competitive environment with game after game and the loads that happen. It's just because the EPL teams have 40 guys that are that good, not 10. So it's like that's where the problem is.
All right, I'll give our resident English man an opportunity to rebut.
I mean, he's right. We've seen Salford City make headlines for getting promoted to the Football League, the 4th tier. Well, one of their guys, mate, their star striker makes about the equivalent of $300,000 a year. That sounds like a pretty expensive striker for FC Dallas, doesn't it?
Well, certainly, yeah, but I don't know what to tell you, dude. I mean, none of this is a mystery to anybody after all these years, right? I guess the larger question is, and this is what gets back to kind of my initial start to all of this, is do we understand what this plan is? And I think part of that goes back to with the departure of Perea and the departure of Muzi and the death of Clavio. Is this a complete cleaning of the slate, and we're starting over with the new technical guy from Gremio and with Lucci, and it's just going to take some time for this stuff to ramp up? And do we need to give them that level of latitude as they go through the season? I don't know. I honestly don't know. And there's a part of me that believes that the front office has essentially already written off the 2019 season.
I don't think it goes as far as that, but I do think that you got to give a new coach, even if he's well familiar with the team, a new coach is going to want to change the team. He's going to want to be his guys. Even if it's one of his former assistants, it's not going to be the same. Any given season, guys get older, new guys come in, players progress or they don't progress. A guy will have a dude he likes versus you guys he doesn't like. Look at even if like a guy like Ryan Hollingshead, look how much Lucci values him in his leadership over where he barely could get on the field last season for Oscar. Everybody's different. So Lucci's going to want to turn this roster over. And I bet you that if we were to look ahead with a time machine to the end of not this season, but maybe next season, you'd find that 80% of this team will be different.
Yeah, but
it's just the way it works.
Right. But so that leads me to this point about maybe, and when I say right off this season, I don't want it to make it sound that sounds way more harsh than I think it is. But if we get through a summer transfer window and they don't make a substantive change, there was a transfer window that closed recently and they didn't add anybody to this roster, and they have 2 open slots and they have clear needs.
Well, they did. No, that's the same transfer window in which they added Acosta, Andresic. All those guys that were complaining about were busts. Those were all the window that just closed.
Well, okay, yes.
It just wasn't at the end of it, but it's the same window.
By the time the window did close, they still had an opportunity they not only had an opportunity to add players, they actually had a significant amount of the season played to judge where they were at, and they could have made additions, and they chose not to. Now,
that's true. They did look around, though. They did try.
Well, okay.
I know they put out the effort.
I'm using try in air quotes right now. But my point
getting back to your question, which is the summer window, Dan Hunt, as you say, went on the record and talked about how they had this whole Bayern hookup coming. So, they better now. He's told them everybody it's happening.
So he has specifically said somebody is coming from Germany in this summer window.
That's what I remember him saying. He made a big, huge deal about it. Remember, he specifically mentioned, who did he mention? Robin and damn it, who was the other one?
I was unaware of this.
Ribery.
Yeah, no. Huh?
Was it Ribery?
Yes.
Rubbery?
He specifically mentioned those 2 guys by name, and then he specifically said that he had never really thought about like retiring kind of guys. He always kind of wanted guys more in their prime. But he specifically went into that whole thing about how they was coming. So, maybe he backtracked that later and said something about it could be the winner.
They will come.
I think my point is that if we get through the summer window and they don't make substantive additions, they make They may make another one of these historically consistent random South American guy that does nothing but sit on the bench for the most of the second half of the season. I think that would be our clear indicator that this is a complete rebuild, to your point, that Lucci needs to put in 80% new people for the 2020 season.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is. And look, this is a team still. This is Major League Soccer. This team is in 5th place. They're in a rough patch. Clearly, by the time all of the international stuff is gone, there's well more than enough season left over. Paxton comes back. He's in great form because he's just killed it in the World Cup, and the U.S. has won the U20s. And they play a pretty even Steven second half of the season and get into the playoffs. And everybody's thinking, oh, actually, that wasn't bad. 2019.
Well, if you're looking for a sign, well, number one, one question may be like, what does Coleman look like over the next month? But the bigger indicator that they're clearing the deck for something is they traded Pedroso. They have 2 open senior roster spots, and they have they have 2 open international spots because now they're down to 7 and they've got 9. So I think it's clear as day that they think something's happening. They're clearing the deck and getting ready for something. So we'll see. But, the signs are all there that something's coming down.
But also, I mean, Andre Zanotta's office chair isn't even warm yet. He hasn't been there that long. With him comes a whole new plan, presumably focus in South America again to supplement the youth. But that is going to take some time. And it may just be a case of they'll be scrambling around at the end of this window, and the winter will be the main focus. But even looking further at it, Chuy Vera, the director of international scouting, or is now director of scouting, I should say. He's only been here a year. He's still kind of setting up his deal in the US, and now he's balancing coaching as well. So
the 19s.
It's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. Hopefully, I know Dan Hunt is kind of acting as cheerleader for the Bayern Munich partnership after it's been heavily criticised by fans. So maybe saying, hey, we can sign star players that were kind of relevant many moons ago, could just be to try and placate the fans as much as anything.
FC Dallas has LAFC coming into town for an odd quirk in the scheduling in just 3 days. That game, by the way, in another bizarre move, was moved to 6:30 from its original start time a couple of hours earlier, and we asked the club for a reason why, and they essentially said, well, they played Thursday night and have to travel on Friday. We wanted to give them as much time to rehab and recoup as possible. I can't imagine the havoc that has wreaked among the few fans that were going to attend the game in the first place that made plans. And the fact
our
that
Twitter blew up about it.
I know. And I don't know who made that decision. I don't know who asked for it. I can't assume this was singularly one club or the other club's decision. It's just a really, really odd decision that I think will only come I think there will be more havoc wreaked on the fans than benefit added to the players in terms of time added for their rehab.
Yeah, it's now during the final Game of Thrones.
Yeah, and it's on Texas 21, so the game kicks off at 6:30. And also, by the next time we do one of these podcasts, Dan, you brought to my attention that FC Dallas's women's team will kick off their season in the WPSL.
Certainly do. It's Tyler Powell's second season as head coach. Spoke to him in the week for a preview we'll have up on the blog. He's really excited, looking forward to the season. He's going to have Madison Haley back, who is the daughter of Charles Haley. She only managed to play 4 games last year, but got 3 assists and 7 goals in that time. You'll have Taryn Torres, who's an academy product, who's at the University of Virginia in the under-23s women's national team. They're hoping to have potentially have Athalie Palomo and Reina Reyes, both Mexico U20s that came through the academy. Should be a good season. They're looking more at returning academy players than anything, and trying to get more players into the NWSL draft. This year saw 2 players who played for the WPSL team drafted into NWSL. Casey Tillman, who was a NCAA national champion, and Julie James, who is playing with Carly Lloyd at Sky Blue FC. She went, I think, 7th in the draft or 11th. Season kicks off on Wednesday against Texas Spurs, which is Ed Puskarich's team.
Puskarich.
Puskarich, yeah.
Okay.
No, you did fine. You're British. I get it. Where do they
We
play
just
the
know
games?
them, that's all.
Where do they play the games, Dan?
They're playing on Dr. Pink Field. They are looking into the possibility of doing double headers with North Texas SC in the stadium.
Excellent. That's a good segue. And Buzz, you hung out and watched North Texas continue their undefeated season against Orlando B.
Man, they're good. I mean, that's the biggest question for me with that club is that are they so good that they're in the wrong league? Because they're 5 for 5, right? I mean, they're dominating that play, and they're doing it with basically an almost entire academy roster. I mean, they had Zolbeck in goal, who's old, but then it was like everybody else on the team was like 22 and down, and all the way down to like a 15, 16-year-old kid playing. So it's like they're basically running out an academy team and steamrolling that league. It's exciting. It's fun to watch.
Am I wrong in saying that the game last weekend was actually not dissimilar to the senior team, where they had some injuries and some call-ups? And so when you say they're playing a youthful team, even for North Texas soccer, that was actually like their B team for North Texas soccer.
No, I mean, they had the same problem as FC Dallas, that Cervania was gone, and he's been playing for them a lot. Right, Pepe's with the U17s, who's their talisman scorer up front. You know, they brought in another academy guy, Johan Gomez, who's going to University of Portland next year, this fall. So they're basically running out teams filled with essentially over half literal academy players. You know, using a couple of guys that are signed to North Texas, and this last game, I think Colin Montgomery and Brian Reynolds were the only players that came down. And don't forget that Brian Reynolds is 17, and he's so young. He could actually have a whole nother season in the academy if he wanted. You know, it's just ridiculous how they're knocking off these fully professional teams with basically an academy team. It's fantastic.
And speaking at the farthest reaches of that, we saw the disappointing end of the USOpen Cup run by Rayados. They lost in Oklahoma it was on penalty kicks, was it not? Or was it
no? It was they got 2 penalty kicks.
Penalties in the last.
Okay, yeah. So, by the way, just congratulations flat out to them for their amazing continual runs into the Open Cup. This may not have been as deep as some previous ones, but the fact that they ever get as far as they do, considering they're just a pub team, is pretty impressive. Although now that we have the Florida Soccer Soldiers, we need to think about maybe a different naming convention, because I can't figure out if that's either A, the worst, or B, the best name in soccer history. I'm not quite sure.
It's not the best. Bug Eaters is the best, but it's pretty good.
Oh, yeah, Bug Eaters is pretty damn fantastic.
I will always say it's Lee Railway Mechanics Institute Football Club, but
Fair enough. I'll give you.
I don't know that one.
I'll give you an opportunity to throw that one in the pot for best worst name.
I mean, how typical of Rayados, though. Their van broke down in Denton on the way to Oklahoma, and they ended up having to do an emergency rental for somebody.
Oh, I
to
didn't
get
know
up
that.
there.
I didn't.
Yeah,
so
typical.
the game before their flight got canceled, and they got a flat tire driving up, and then their car broke down on the way up to their game to Oklahoma. Fantastic.
Yeah, in Denton.
All right. Well, kudos to them.
The Open Cup's been a little bit weird this year. We've only got Forward Madison and Florida Soccer Soldiers are the only teams outside or below the USL Championship that are still in the competition.
Maybe some people are taking it a little bit more seriously this year.
Yeah.
Well, and they're getting scheduled it was scheduled so that it would be all USL Championship and then every USL Championship team plays an MLS team.
I want to throw one more note at you on that game. Amir Sasasharovich, who was a draft pick last year that I really wanted to stick with FC Dallas and did not. He is now with Oklahoma City, and that was his pro debut, and he scored a goal and drew the PK, the first PK. So great to see him playing and doing well, and I'm glad that he got on with somebody solid club in Oklahoma City Energy.
And wanting to support local soccer as much as we can. Unfortunately, the Denton Diablos did not get to play their originally scheduled debut game. I guess it was against Dallas FC. So now their debut game will be their big derby clash.
Yes.
Because they're two long-standing rivals. As they will host Fort Worth this Saturday at 7 p.m. up at North Texas University Soccer Stadium. Tickets are $12 at the gate, I'm told, Buzz.
Yeah, the Chisholm Trail Classico. It'll be fun. They actually have like a championship boxing belt to give to the winner of the series. So, I mean, support local soccer, local derby, love it. Brand new team, who cares? It's local, it's fun. I'm going to be there on Saturday for sure.
Yeah, the coach of Denton has I saw the article that you wrote for the Morning News this week about that.
Yeah,
and man, he rightfully is making it very clear that he doesn't have all of his parts yet. So whatever starting 11 he rolls out may be a collection of guys he picks up at the local 7-Eleven this weekend, because he's got a bunch of college kids that haven't showed up yet. But yeah. I love the brand and I love the attitude, and I wish both those teams well this season.
Yeah, they're going with the USL 2 model, the old PDL model of all college kids. And you're right, some of them won't be here yet, and they have some open tryout kids that they signed from like lower division teams and stuff. Fort Worth is obviously a well-established team that uses like 6 sidekicks guys or 5 sidekicks guys. I don't remember how it is. So those dudes are in mid-season form. So it's a bad foot to step off with Diablos, because they didn't even get a game to warm up with, basically. But I mean, I love to support local soccer. We love to support local soccer. So I'm excited. I'm hoping that there's a void in Fort Worth or the western half of this metroplex that could for sure be filled by somebody at a slightly higher level than that. Hoping it's going to be one of these teams eventually. We'll see. But in the meantime, they're playing an NPSL grudge match on Saturday, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
With all the talk about how you build community and you market online digitally and you promote yourself and you build a brand, it'll be fascinating to see what their very first attendance turnout is for Diablos. I'm dying to see what that number turns out to be. So, all right. Well, Dan and Buzz, thanks. It's very late. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning when we're recording this, so it'll be sometime Friday before I get this posted, because I'm super sleepy. Thanks to you both for taking the time today, and thank you, fans, for listening, and we'll join you next week for another edition of Third Degree, the podcast.